CFR Network, CFR News, welcome back. Good day, good night, all. Returning guests back by popular demands. We welcome back Micah Dank. How are we, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. No summer here in the old sunny England.
Yeah.
Things are kind of getting back to normal of sorts. It's a wonderful time to be on this plane of existence.
Yep.
So we have historically, just to catch some of the potential new listeners in, we have historically gone through the Enuma-Elish, Book of Enoch, and the Bible, and we have historically looked back and made correlations to the astrological signs.
Have we done Revelation?
That's a good question. This is your third visit to the broadcast. I don't think you have. I think you may have touched on bits and pieces of it, but I don't.
I think we should do that first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do Revelation.
Okay. Take it away, then, Senor. Take it away.
Okay. So what I need to do with everybody, bear with me one moment, is I need to go through. These are for the new people too.
Yes, of course.
And just for the people who just want to hear it again, who like this presentation, I'm going to go over the 12 signs of the Zodiac, because you need to know the key phrases in order to decode.
Mm-hmm.
And the decoding is rather simple, to be honest with you. There's not a lot of key phrases, but we can start it. So we'll talk about Aquarius first. Now, the first sign that I talk about is Aquarius, which is represented by the man with the water pitcher. Okay. So anytime you ever hear the story, the words son of man, because Aquarius is the sign of the man, whereas Virgo is the woman. Man, baptism, because this is how you baptize someone, with a pitcher of water and you pour it out onto them. Fountain, stream, river, pond, things of that nature, water related. They're talking about Aquarius. Then Pisces is the sign of the two fish in the water. So when they're talking about like Jonah being swallowed by a great fish, or Leviathan, the fish god, they're talking about, or fish or water, they're talking about Pisces, because Pisces is also a water sign. Then Aries is the ram. In Aries, you have March 21st, which is the spring equinox. It's a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night. It's also the Passover, or the passing over of the sun over the equator. In ancient Jewish times, the Passover literally meant God was passing over Egypt as he smite the firstborns, anyone who didn't have the lamb's blood or the ram's blood on their doorframe. In Christianity, the passing over is changed and it becomes the resurrection of God's son. So you have both Easter, which is the resurrection of the sun, and the Passover, the sun going over the equator at the same time. So anytime you hear ram, lamb, shepherd, ram's horn, you know, they're talking about Aries. Then the next sign is Taurus, which is the bull. So when you look in the sky and you see Taurus during the season where it's supposed to be, you know that you need to put the plow on the bull so that you can plant the seed so you can harvest in Virgo and Libra. Now, we don't use the bull anymore. The bull is an ancient thing, but that's what it signified. Now we have all sorts of machinery that, okay, but back in the day, you needed the bull. Okay, so whenever you hear bull, ox, calf, cow, they're talking about Taurus. Okay, then Gemini is the twins. It's the story of Castor and Pollux Troy, whose sister was Helen of Troy. It's the story of Achilles. Now, anytime you hear the words twins or brothers, they're talking about Gemini. Then Cancer is the crab, and it's the sideways moving creature. The crab shuffles from side to side, whereas humans don't do that unless they're doing like a football drill, for example. American football or proper football, whatever you want. That's how they do it. That's what they do. They shuffle side to side. It's the drill, but that's not how we walk. We walk front to back, or we walk diagonally. Okay. So basically what happens is the sun rises a degree on its axis starting December 25th. Then on the 26th, it rises an additional degree. So the days start to get longer, the nights get shorter. It rises a degree every single day till it hits June 21st. Okay. Then for 3 days, that's the summer solstice, and that's in the dead of Cancer. Now, and then for 3 days, it walks sideways like the crab, and it stays at that height for 3 days. Then on June 25th, it drops a degree. And then it continues to drop a degree every day until December 21st, where it will then walk again sideways for another 3 days. So whenever you hear crab or beetle, for example, the beetle in the Egyptian zodiac,
Scarab.
this scarab, correct. The scarab was what was Cancer was represented as. So whenever you hear crab or beetle, they're talking about Cancer. Then Leo is the king, the lion, the king of the jungle. The ruling planet of Leo is actually the sun. So whenever you hear lion or lioness or cub, they're talking about Leo. Then Virgo is the woman holding the wheat stalk. So remember before we said you plant in Taurus with the bull.
Yes.
Well, you plant in Taurus with the bull, and then the virgins would cultivate the wheat in Virgo in order to make the bread for the year. So whenever you hear words like virgin or woman or wheat, grain, seed, barley, things of that nature, they're talking about Virgo. And Libra is the justice. It's the scales, it's the balance, it's the just one. And the reason it's justice is because it judges God's sun as it passes over the fall equinox and begins its descent into winter, into cold, into death, which it's going to do in about 9 days from today. Now, what happens is during the equinox in the spring, it's celebrated as the resurrection, as the Passover. It's celebrated, but here it's mourned because it's being sentenced to death, and it's going to be done that in a couple of steps. So whenever you hear the words law, judge, justice, the just one, divorce, marriage, court, things of that nature, lawly things, they're talking about Libra. Libra is also wine season. Okay, so basically you plant in Taurus and then you press the grapes in Libra to make the wine for the year. So whenever you hear wine, vineyard, wine press, they're talking about Libra. It's also olive oil season. That's when they press the oil, okay, the olives to get the oil. So that's Libra. Then Scorpio is the scorpion. He is known as the betrayer because when a scorpion bites you, it leaves an imprint in your skin that looks like a pair of lips. Okay, it's why the mafia has the kiss of death, and it's why Jesus was betrayed by Judas with the kiss, because Judas represents Scorpio and Jesus represents the sun. The sun is judged in Libra and it's betrayed in Scorpio. Okay, those are the first two steps. And then finally in Sagittarius, this is where the hunter with the bow and the arrow shoot the sun to inflict further punishment on the sun and kill it. And why? Because in December 21st is Sagittarius. Okay, whereas in Cancer, you have June 21st, which is the summer solstice.
Summer solstice, yes.
December 21st is the winter solstice. What happens is the sun doesn't rise above the horizon on December 21st. So the ancients used to notice that and say that God's sun was dead. And then it walks sideways for 3 days. It stays at that height. So they used to say God's sun was dead for 3 days. And then what happens is on December 25th, which is in Capricorn, the goat, the sun rises again, and it's celebrated as the birth of Jesus, as the birth of Mithra, as the birth of Osiris, as the birth of Horus, as the birth of Tammuz. You can go to all these gods. They're all born on December 25th, and this is the reason. Then Capricorn is the goat, because if you look at the zodiac wheel, Capricorn's at the bottom, and it starts to climb up the mountain, much like the mountain goats climb up the mountain. So it's just a metaphor for that. So those are the 12 signs, and those are the words you need to look for in order to decode. So do you have any thoughts on Revelation before I begin?
In what respects? We can go
in any respect.
Well, okay. Let's the book of Revelation itself is a future prophecy written on the island of Patmos by John, and Yeshua HaMashiach, aka Jesus, was revealed in a spirit form, and from there we get the book of Revelations.
Correct. But now the book of Revelation is nothing but an astrology book. All the same. And I'm going to go over that with you. Many people have used and looked towards Revelation. Many Christians have said it's the end of times. Okay. Many Christians, there's not been a generation since the Bible has begun where people didn't think they were living in the end times. Okay. That seems to be a privilege for the Christians to say that it's the end times.
Well,
Revelation.
I would say there have been other pockets of quote unquote tribes or civilizations where death was a the thought of death or an immediate sort of apocalypse was coming, like a disaster was coming. So it's not necessarily isolated sheerly at, but I will say it is one of the largest doomsday purveyors.
Right. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these passages with the keywords that I went over with you, and I'm going to show you how it's just astrology. So we start with Revelation 4:7. The first living creature was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had a face like a man. The fourth was like a flying eagle. Okay. Now the first is the lion, Leo.
Mm-hmm.
The second is the ox, Taurus. The third had a face like a man, Aquarius. And the fourth was like a flying eagle. Now, in astrology, the Scorpio, is the belly crawling creature. Okay. It's the lowest form of life on earth because it drags on its belly, much like the snake was commanded to do that after the deception in the Garden of Eden.
In Genesis,
You
yes.
believe that story? Correct. However, in astrology, the scorpion evolves into the eagle, which is the highest flying form of life.
Now, can you
Okay.
explain that, Micah? How in astrology does the scorpion transmute into the eagle? Is that through the
Um,
processions or?
it's basically, so there is an eagle constellation. Okay. There
Mhm.
is an eagle constellation, but the scorpion, it's a metaphor. It goes from crawling on its belly to being the highest flying form of life.
Okay.
See, each of these zodiac signs, they do become other ones. Okay. So it would take a long time to really get into it, but
Mhm.
basically they all evolve. Okay. There's a lot of evolutionary study in the sciences of zodiac. But
Okay.
basically, for this passage, all you need to know is that the scorpion becomes the eagle.
Mhm.
So if we have lion, Leo, that's in the dead of summer. Okay. The ox, Taurus, that's the dead of spring. Aquarius, man, that's the dead of winter. And Scorpio, the eagle, that's the dead of fall. Now, the lion and the man are opposing signs on the zodiac wheel. The ox and the scorpion, Taurus and the Scorpio, are opposing signs on the zodiac wheel. Okay, so what these do is they make an X through the zodiac wheel. So when you have the zodiac wheel, you can make a cross through it. That when you connect the solstices and the equinox,
Mhm.
it makes a cross. Okay, it's a perfect cross. It's the cross that God's son basically lives and dies on. Okay, much like the story of Jesus. Okay, this makes an X through that cross through the zodiac wheel. So it's a perfect celestial alignment. So that's why that was done this way. Then if we go to Revelation 5:5, then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scrolls and its seven seals." Okay, now the Lion of the tribe of Judah, okay, is Leo. It's Jesus. It's Leo. Okay, in the zodiac. Okay, these are names given by the church. When the sun is in Aquarius, the man sign, Jesus is known as the Son of Man. When the sun is in Pisces, the two fish, he's known as the fisherman of men. And it's also why he feeds the masses with two fish on the mound, because that's Pisces. When the sun is in Aries, he is known as the Lamb of God or the Good Shepherd. Okay. When the sun is in Cancer, he is known as the beetle. He's known as the good beetle, according to St. Augustine. When the sun is in Leo,
The good
okay,
beetle.
Jesus,
That's a new one. I've never heard that one before.
you've never heard that? You can look
Mm.
it up. St. Augustine. St.
Mhm.
Augustine called him the good beetle because he knew this was where it came from. Okay, and the sign of Leo.
That's clearly a connection to astrology with that reference. A blatant more to the Egyptian sort of scarab beetle type.
Yep. So when the sun is in Leo, he's known as the Lion of Judah. When the sun is in Virgo, Jesus is given the name the bread of life, and he is also born of a virgin, Virgo. Okay. when the sun is in Libra, he is known as the just. Remember, justice, judgment. So all these names for Jesus, you just go through the zodiac sign. He has a name, a nickname for all of them. The church teaches these names for him. The Bible references these names for him, and all they are celestial mentions of the sun in different signs.
What would be the Gemini name for him?
Well, he was the twin with James. He rode into Jerusalem on twin donkeys. They talk about the twins. Now, how is the twin donkey? How does that make sense? How do you ride on two donkeys? How do you ride on one? You just ride on one and hop to the other?
The only way I'm actually picturing that in my mind, and the only way I can see that, and it's quite comical, would be to sit on one and put your feet on the other.
Right. So, okay. Is that how you think that went down?
I don't think so.
Exactly. Okay. But you remember he has a brother named James, the twins. There's brothers in the, in the 12 disciples, right? They talk about brothers. They talk about twins. So I didn't go over all the signs, but I went over like 3/4 of them.
Yes.
These are all given. These are all names given to Jesus from the church in the Bible too. And they all just represent the sun. That's what it is. Now, in Revelation 6:1, I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." Now, we went over the 4 living creatures just now. Okay. But do you know why the Lamb opens the first seal? Do you know why it has to be the first seal and why it's the Lamb or the Ram in Aries?
No, I can't even put a correlation to it. I guess
it's because
spring?
Aries is the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
The word apri in Italian, April, apri. Apri means to open. It opens the new year.
Apri. I like that one. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, Revelation 6:2, the very next one. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. You want to take a guess? Sagittarius, the man with the bow and the arrow. Very good. There was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. I mean, it's just blatantly obvious if you look at this. Okay.
And what's the significance of the color? Is that just for creative license, I guess, or is there any significance?
Yeah, I believe so. Well, if you're talking about the 4 horsemen, right? Now, the 4 horsemen are Sagittarius. What happens in Sagittarius with the sun? It dies.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So in the Gospels, there's 4 Gospels. Jesus dies 4 times. So he dies 4 times in Sagittarius. That's why there's 4 horses. That's why there's 4 Gospels. Make sense?
Okay. Yes.
Revelation 6:6. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures. Again, we went over those 4 creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages. Well, that's just Virgo, the wheat stalk.
Yeah.
And 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages. Well, I went over that. That's Virgo with the wheat stalk. And do not damage the oil and the wine. Well, the oil and the wine is Libra. Okay. That's Virgo and Libra. This passage are connecting signs. They're connecting signs. I watched as he opened Revelation 6:12. I watched as he opened the 6th seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black, like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth, as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. So you have the sun turned black like a sackcloth made of goat hair. The moon turned blood red, and figs drop from a fig tree. Now, goat is Capricorn. The goat hair is Capricorn. That's the goat.
Yeah.
And it's black is because Saturn is the ruling planet of Capricorn, which is known as the black planet. The Jews wear a black cube on their forehead, and they wrap it's called a tefillin around their wrists 7 times. Okay, have you ever seen the Jews with the black cube? Yes. Now the Muslims also worship a black cube. Okay, it's in Kaaba. It's a Kaaba. It's in Mecca. Stone. Okay, so this goes back to Saturn worship.
Alleged to be a rock from the moon or something, wasn't it? A meteorite that came from the moon.
A meteorite,
yeah.
Yeah, they kissed the meteorite, if any of it is left. Right. So the moon turned blood red. So directly across Capricorn, it's cross sign. So before we were talking about neighboring signs, now we're talking about opposing signs. Capricorn and Cancer are opposing signs. And the ruling planet of Cancer is the moon. Then the first time figs are good to eat are in June or Cancer. Okay. The second time they're good to eat is August to October, which is basically Libra. So the moon turned blood red directly across from Capricorn's cross sign, which is Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first time figs are good to eat are in Cancer. So there's two mentions right there. Okay. Revelation 7:4. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. Have you heard this passage?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you know
So
that most religious people take this to mean
12,000 from each tribe.
Right. That there's a predestined amount of people that go to heaven.
Depending on who you speak to, that would be the surface level, and then going a little bit deeper, or using metaphysics, or just examining the manuscript even further. That is the 144,000 would be, again, in some people's mindset, would be the elect. There will be more people, but those are like the creme de la creme, if that would be the best way to put it.
Well, what happens with the 144,000? They get to go see God, right? That's basically what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you familiar with a science they had back then called the chakras?
Yes.
There's 7 chakras.
Mm-hmm.
The root has 4 petals. The sacral has 6. The solar plexus has 10. The heart has 12, and the throat has 16, which equals 48. Okay. So the third eye chakra is represented by 96 and only has 2 petals because it's 2 times as powerful as the lower chakras. So 48 times 2 equals 96. Now the crown chakra is 1,000 times more powerful than the lower 6 chakras.
Mm-hmm.
When you add the lower 6, you get 96 plus 48 equals 144. And then you times that by the crown chakra 1,000 times and you get your 144,000.
Wow.
Okay. When you've activated all your chakras, this is when you get to go see God. Okay. And this was a competing.
I've never heard that connection to the chakra system and the 144,000. I like that.
This was a competing thought process at the time. You got to understand, the chakras are a very old system that have been taught for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Revelation 9:3, and out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions on the earth. Well, the scorpions are Scorpio, and the Scorpio's power is to betray. That's what the Scorpio does, is it betrays. So there's plenty of passages in the Bible where they talk about locusts, where basically the people on earth have been praying this and that, and then locusts come and they eat all the crops and they do this. It betrays humanity. Okay, so that's Revelation 9:3. Okay, then 9:7, the next one. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads, they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had tails with stingers like scorpions. So the locusts looked like horses. That's Sagittarius. On the head, they wore something like crowns of gold. That's the sun in Sagittarius, the crown of gold. Okay, and their faces resembled human faces. That's Aquarius and Virgo, the man and the woman. Their hair was like woman's hair. That's Virgo. Their teeth were like lion's teeth. That's Leo. Mm-hmm. And they had tails with stingers. That's scorpions. That's Scorpio. So there's 7-8 different passages. And 7-8 different signs in this one passage.
And what's the how do you interpret that particular verse that you've just read?
It's just storing information. All these gospels, everything that I've talked about so far with you, mm-hmm. all these gospels, all they talk about is just basically the 12 zodiac signs and the 48 constellations that they knew about at the time that this was written. We know that there's 88 now, but they had 48. And also, you have to understand, Saturn was also a lot closer to Earth back in the time.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
It was a lot closer. They were able to see it. And when it comes to Saturn, that's why men wear wedding rings and women wear wedding rings. It's because of the rings of Saturn. You had to pledge your love in front of God, and God was Saturn at the time. Okay, Saturn worship. This is predating what literal Judaism and literal Christianity believe in. Okay, this was Saturnalia, Saturn worship. That's why women had to wear their ear rings. They get their ear pierced and they'd wear rings because they were told that they had to listen to their god, and their god was Saturn with the rings. And Saturn was a lot closer.
Saturnalia. What a far cry of how that festival was truly celebrated into comparison to how Christmas, which is the new adopted version of Saturnalia, which is now celebrated.
Yep. Now, Revelation 12:1. Have you heard of the woman with the dragon?
Yes.
A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns. Oh, hold on. 7 heads, 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. So a sign appeared, the sun in Virgo with the moon under her feet. If the sun is in a sign, the moon is directly under it. Okay. Now, an enormous red dragon appeared. Have you heard of the constellation Draco?
True. I was just going to say it had to be Draco. Yeah.
Draco is the dragon. And you know how they said a third of the stars got knocked out of the sky? Well, Draco's tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky. Well, its tail, okay, if you look at it in the sky, it goes from Aries to Sagittarius, which is a third of the zodiac, or a third of the stars out of the sky.
Okay. And is that supposed to be, is that meant a literal sense, as in a procession is going past, or is that just a description of the constellation of Draco?
The description of Draco.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, when you look at the sky, look for the dragon with the tail that takes a third of the stars out of the sky with them. That's all they're talking about.
Ingenious.
You know, this is what they. I mean, I can keep going. This is what the signs are like. This is what everything means. This is what, you know, this is all just hidden astrology. You know, I'm going through this line by line, you know, much like I've gone through other ones. Revelation 13:2. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. Well, the mouth of a lion, that's Leo. The feet of a bear, okay? You know the bear? Do you know, hold on a sec. Sorry. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor.
Indeed.
Those are the bears, okay? The bear and her cubs. There's a constellation called Camelopardalis. It can reference a camel, Camelos, or a leopard, Camelopardalis. It's in Gemini. It can reference a camel, Camelos, and a leopard, Pardalis. The giraffe used to be called the camel leopard back in the day. And if you think about what the animal looks like, that's kind of pretty accurate.
Oh yeah. What's the reference to that? Camel leopard? What time frame would they have referred to the giraffe as that? And what speaking
around
nation?
The time, maybe 2,000 years ago.
Okay, we're talking
ancient
time then. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what Camelopardalis means. It's camel leopard.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what that basically means. Revelation 13:11. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb. Okay, so that's Aries. We know that. But it spoke like a dragon. Well, that's another reference to Draco. Revelation 18:13. Cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, that's Libra, of fine flour and wheat, that's Virgo, cattle, that's Taurus, sheep, that's Aries, horses and carriages, that's Sagittarius, and human beings sold as slaves, that's Aquarius and Virgo. Another passage with 7 stars, basically, in that. And that, my friend, is the book of Revelation.
So I'm gonna, as I always do, Micah, I've got to do this. I'm gonna play righteous advocate, and I'm gonna ask you one question. A lot of the earlier parts and everything what you said makes a lot of sense, and we can see the correlation. The last, I would say, 3 verses you read we can see the connection, and you made the connection very clear. But for the layman reading this, or even for the initiated reading this, what are they supposed to do with that portion of the information? How would that enhance or make their life easier by knowing that those three particular verses about those connections to the various signs?
So I've mentioned this before, and basically what it boils down to is, when it comes down to this science and understanding it, you have to realize is that the ancients didn't have a calendar system. Okay.
Mhm.
They didn't have a calendar system that was very well. I can look at my computer. I can go get it. Anyway, if I get my computer, it tells you the time and the date at the bottom.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know how long it took us to figure that out?
No.
Do you have any idea how many thousands and tens of thousands of years it took for us to figure the stars out, to figure the months out, we weren't given this calendar, you know? And basically the ancients had like a sun, what do you call that?
Dial?
A sundial. Yeah, a
Mhm.
sundial. You know, that's how they knew the day. You know, they wouldn't know that the night was coming. And you have to understand is when the night was coming back in the day, some of these societies were still in the food chain, you know, with lions and
Oh,
bears and
yes.
everything.
Indeed.
Okay. So they
Yeah.
mention all these lions and bears, Daniel in the lion's den, this and that. They mention all this kind of stuff for the ancients. And the ancients did not have a calendar system. They didn't know what, like, it's a big joke with Game of Thrones that winter is coming, you know, that was like a very popular line, but it was true. You know, they had to know winter was coming.
Of
They had to know
course.
to look at the sky and see the bull. And when you see the bull, you've got to plant, because if you don't plant, you're fucked. You're not going to eat in Virgo and Libra. You're not going to have the bread. You're not going to have the wine. You're not going to have the grain. You're not going to be able to store the rice. You're not going to be able to, you know, there's plenty of things that you have to do, you know, in order to store for winter. Then winter comes, it's cold, it's desolate. All the scary animals come out if they're not hibernating, you know, they're scavenging for food.
Yes.
It's freezing. You know, people get sick more often in the winter. They always have. And basically, this was a way to embed this kind of information. They would hide it because absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Agreed.
Okay, so absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what they would do is they would bury these celestial references. You know, they'd find a star, they'd name the star, and then they'd bury a reference in the Bible. You know, they wrote this Bible and they'd bury all these references because they didn't want the common people to know this, because the ancients used to know this, okay? Because before 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea, the ancient Christians, okay, they were known as heliognostics. And helios in Greek means gnosis, knowers. No, helios means the sun, and heliognostic and gnosis means to know. They were sun worshippers. Hello?
Yes, to know.
They were sun worshippers. So the ancients knew this. Now, the other thing too is that everything was written in Hebrew, but the ancients at the time knew this, you know, for people talking about translating to Greek, to this, to the Romans, to Latin, to this. The ancients knew that you spoke in Hebrew back in this time, but if you were an intellect, you would speak in Greek. So that's why we get a lot of Greek texts that come and people go, oh, the Jews are older, the Greeks might, it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter. The truth of the matter is that nowadays people are so much further closer to believing in the literal Bible than they were 1,500, 2,000 years ago. Because 2,000 years ago, they'd be able to read this the way it was supposed to read. Like I mentioned, you see the bull in the sky, you have to plow. There was no calendar to remind you.
And
you know, it took.
You bring a very excellent point in that respect regarding the calendar. Another thing that we don't, which is a mystery, I guess, is, you know, at this time, as you're highlighting, there's no calendar system, but it seems that so many of the civilizations at that time and prior we're so advanced technologically in regards to building structures and stuff that we cannot replicate. So at some in so many different ways, they were so much far ahead of us than we are now. But at the same time, as you're highlighting, calendar-wise and electrically and technologically wise, we
Right.
have kind of advanced.
Well, you got to understand is that there's something called chronological ethnocentrism. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, but chronological ethnocentrism, it's basically a way of explaining away it's not a perversion, but it's a way of explaining a bias. Okay, chronological ethnocentrism says that we are the furthest along in time. Us right now, we're the furthest along in time that we know of. There could be parallel universes, but that aside, that we know of, we're the furthest along in time. That must mean our science, our medicine, everything must have been the furthest along, and that's just not true.
Of course.
Where we lack in one area here, they had it back then.
Yeah.
Where we had an area back then that they lack, we have here. You know, it's not like we keep our humanity goes through cycles.
Agreed.
Okay, every thousands of years, we're basically you rise and you raise your vibration and you get smarter in sciences and this and that, and then there's a dark age, and then it rises again, and then there's a dark age. We're cyclical people.
Just like nature has cycles that we're currently sort of experiencing now. In some places that it's hot, record-breaking temperatures allegedly. In other places there's more rain allegedly than there has been in recorded sort of meteorological sort of records and stuff. So I totally agree with the cyclical nature of nature and humanity.
Now you have to understand too is when it comes to the Bible, it borrows idea from Egypt, from Greece. The Jewish Bible, the 10 Commandments come from something called the 42 Negative Confessions. It's book 125 of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Okay. The other thing you got to realize too is that the Egyptians kept meticulous records, even for unflattering shit. You know, even things that didn't paint them in the greatest light, they kept great records. There is zero mention of Exodus. There is zero mention of that. The Bible is just stories that are made up of things of their time. Okay, we don't really do that anymore. We don't really blend fact and fiction, which is what my book series does, which is what I try to do. You know, but when you're talking about prophecy, okay, you got to understand too is that the science that I gave you for like the summer solstice, this only works in the northern hemisphere. Okay, in the southern hemisphere in Australia, so it's going to be the fall equinox in 9 days. In Australia, that's going to be the spring equinox. See, it's opposite.
So okay, so you bring up a very good point there. So how do they just literally, because they're in the southern equinox, so would they just reverse the information, or is there information specifically?
No. You would go by this information, but you would understand that it comes from back then. See, this science was created because you got to understand is that the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Italians, the Romans, the Catholics, the Jews, everybody, that's in the northern hemisphere. You know, if you were talking about Ethiopia, even that's the northern hemisphere.
Yes.
If all these religions came from the southern hemisphere, it would be as they are. It would be reversed. It would be a whole different story. The story that I explain only works from the northern hemisphere. But to understand it in the southern hemisphere is what they were trying to do. In the same way that let's say like
would they, before you continue that, for apologies, how would they apply the planting, the basic in regards to the crops? They wouldn't be able to apply that utilizing the northern hemisphere.
No, not this way. But what you do is you use the opposing signs. So you have Taurus, which is the bull. Okay, that's for the northern hemisphere. You see the bull, you plant. Yes. Okay, but its opposing sign is Scorpio. Okay, so when you see the scorpion in the sky, and it literally looks like a scorpion, so you can't really miss it. That's when you plant in this. That's when you plant in the southern hemisphere.
Right. Okay. Micah, we had planned to go through the some other extra biblical texts. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to wind this build down and this conversation down, and we're gonna have to sort of reconvene to get into those extra biblical
Yeah, I had a
texts.
feeling. I had a feeling. I just felt like this would probably be more
No,
interesting and better.
no. I think it's added, as you always do. You add a lot of value, and you raise some very, very poignant questions that need to be answered for some people. For others, you're just reconfirming what they already know. But it's always great to have you on to, as I say, to shed some more light on some of these manuscripts, because people do take them very literally. Some
Yes,
people, have.
unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. But I will say, again, always seeing the cup half full. Some people can take them very literally and still be good people, still can coexist, still can be quote unquote successful. So it's all about application. As I always say, it's all about how you use the information, how you use the tools that you have, to be the best person that you can ultimately be.
Hmm.
You have people who will take these manuscripts and have already done the astrological in-depth cross comparison. They can draw this information out. Now they're looking from a more of a metaphysical side, and more of, okay, so the relation to astrology, astronomy, we can see that. What about the anthropomorphification of these star signs and how they were created, why were they were put in, so people can, it's knowledge is infinite, and
Right.
we search the wonders of humanities, that we search for so much that we don't know. If we don't know it,
Uh-huh.
we want an answer to it. It's like the newborn baby. Why
Right.
who?
But let me ask you a question. Let me ask
Yes.
you a question. We've done a bunch of texts right now. You
Mhm.
do realize that when the religious people interpret it
Mhm.
literally, when you want to interpret a talking snake or a talking donkey or emissions like a horse or things like that you find in the Bible and make you go, what the fuck? They use something called apologetics,
Oh yes.
which basically which basically is a way to explain this in a logical way. What I'm doing is using one mode of science
Mhm.
to explain the entire Bible. I mean, I could do any book. I have so much more that I can share too. I've done a lot of work on this, and I've put it in a 6-book series. And if anybody wants to get it, it's called Into the Rabbit Hole, and it's on Amazon. Or you can reach out to me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Micah Dank, and I'll send you a signed copy of them. I do that too. I sell hundreds of copies out of my house that are signed.
The
Um,
best way to do it, guys, go directly. But I know some people do like the Amazon kind of thing. But
I'm fine with that too. That's fine.
excellent. And as usual, information will be below in the description. Micah, we will definitely get this sorted out for those 4 gospels that we need to definitely get into.
Absolutely.
I
I've
think.
also done. We could do Jubilees if you want to do the Book of
Ooh,
Jubilees,
Book
which is
of
fantastic. I just did that. It's the first 50 chapters of the Bible with slight changes because it's a
Yes.
Gnostic text, but it's the first 50 chapters. And I've decoded that too. We could probably do that next time too.
We have so much to do, Senor. We have so much to do. Definitely. As I say, links below down in the description. I'm pretty sure you already know. You've come over here because you saw Micah Dank's name. If you're new and you've just stumbled across this information, you're like, wow, there's a lot of reference points that were given. I would imagine you already have the manuscript. So go over to the Twitter, go over to the Instagram directly. If you want the signed copy, the Amazon link will be there. Tell a
Or
friend.
just message me, just private
Yeah,
message me and just say, I want to see more information. I'll send you my best works.
this is it. Micah is very quick with responses as well. Very open to the public, unlike some people who are in this realm. Very approachable. As we've heard, very knowledgeable. That's why he's been back 3 times. And there will be a 4th, 5th, 6th, and possibly even a 7th and 8th time.
Mhm.
Glad everybody enjoyed. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and most definitely share.
Absolutely.